My name is Eleanor Silverberg, and the topic I am speaking to you about is healthy coping, which is something that I work on a lot with, particularly with caregivers. In my community, which is in Richmond Hill, Ontario, I have come to be known in my network as the caregiver for caregivers. As humbling as that isn't really very humbling, actually, but it does speak to the amount of experience that I have in working with caregivers. Today, I am probably speaking with people who are dealing with Parkinson's, considering that this is for the Parkinson Society of BC. My work originated with people with dementia and grew to be working with all kinds of caregivers that are dealing with anyone. It could be an aging parent or a family member with chronic illness. So um, the work that I do is a little bit different in that it stands out because as a grief specialist, I help you to cope by transforming the grief of your situation to strengthen resiliency and well being. And I've developed a tool to do this. So let's move on to the next slide. Now, this is the tool that I was talking to you just about. It's called the 3A Selfie Coping Tool, and it's featured in my book, Keeping It Together, How to Cope as a Family Caregiver Without Losing Your Sanity. And some of you may be able to relate to that. The components of this tool are acknowledge, assess, assist. And I'm just wondering in the chat if you've heard of acknowledge, assess, assist before. Could you just give a yes, or you don't have to say where you've seen it, but if you've heard of it, I would like to know if people that are in the webinar today have heard of this or if I'm really presenting very new material. This approach helps you to self-monitor with self-awareness. So it's quite empowering. I just mentioned the book, Keeping It Together, and there in the book, you're provided with a strength enhancing regimen to follow, to juggle actually. There are 3 important elements for you to juggle: self-care, caring, and grieving. The tips for self-care and caring are both usually advised to family caregivers. Ad, advice you will see from time and time again in several articles or in presentations. But there's a reason that you see them time and time again. They're important. For instance, how many times has it been suggested that you take respite? Take breaks from caregiving to re-energize yourself. I think you hear it again and again, but again, there's a reason for that. Also, self-care is so important, and I created an acronym just to, I think, be a little bit different to help you out in remembering the self-care activities to do. And the acronym is C with three E's. And it's like for you to see for yourself and be able to um, monitor this on your own, how you are doing, how frequently are you doing these activities. The activities are sleeping well and resting. As a caregiver, I cannot stress that enough, that to be well rested is helps. It helps in your mood. It helps in your energy level. So if you are sleep deprived, it's really going to affect your well-being and your ability to provide care. Now, if your family member is not sleeping at night, that can really, raise a lot of problems for you because you are not sleeping either. And for that reason, um, it's important to take the breaks to get that rest and sleep that you need, if for nothing else. E is exercise. Often when you need to go for a walk the most is when you don't feel like going for a walk. So yes, at times you may have to push yourself and exercising regularly. The second E is eating, making sure that you're eating well, eating the right foods, and eating regularly, like 3 meals a day, or not going hungry. Because when you're hungry, that affects your mood too. That affects your energy level. So I hope you're following me here on these things and maybe see. I used it quite accidentally, but see for yourself what areas are lacking. Do you need more sleep? Are you eating well? Are you exercising? Now, the third E, maybe you can venture a guess what the third E may be. The second letter is N, and then J, enjoyment. You, I'm not saying that if you have to, think of places to go or, for enjoyment and plan an outing for enjoyment, but participate in things that are enjoyable for you, such as giving yourself a manicure or giving yourself a pedicure, um, watching your favorite television program or watching a movie. The key is enjoyment and genuine enjoyment, because you could saying that you participated in something that was giving you a break or whatever is one thing, but actually enjoying it and genuinely enjoying it, when you do enjoy, you feel it in your body and in your mind and in your spirit. So enjoyment is the third E. So to juggle self-care with also caring as part of the juggling regimen. And caring is being a caregiver in a responsible way, in a way that is helpful to the person that you are providing care for. And you can see how juggling comes in here, because by taking care of yourself, you are also helping and being responsible in caring for your family member. Utilizing resources means utilizing supports, whether they be family members who are helping you out. And if people ask you, can I help? Do you say yes or do you say no? I'm asking you, are you accepting help when it is being offered? Also, I'm going to ask you, are you reaching out to ask for help when needed? And when there are people that want to help, and maybe if you provided something specific for a family member, if you are taking care of your spouse and your daughter or son wants to be helpful, maybe they can watch watch your spouse for a number of hours if your spouse cannot be left alone, or they can do a shopping for you, or but being specific is helpful in getting supports from family members and friends and neighbors. Also, get the education. By attending this webinar, you are utilizing resources by getting the help from the Parkinson Society of BC. And if you have any questions that you need answered, to ask them. And if they can't be answered by the Parkinson Society or whoever you go to, you may be referred to where you can get an answer. So do your research, get your resources, make sure that you're not doing this alone, and that there is a team helping you. It may not be a huge team, but at least have others involved in the caregiving. So we're juggling self-care, we're juggling the caregiving, and the one element, like I said, the work that I do with helping caregivers is helping them to process the loss and the grief that comes with not having not dealing with death, but dealing with having a family member who is progressively in a condition that causes losses to occur, and you may not even be cognizant of it because it's overlooked. But I will get into that. In many years ago, I was doing community outreach in dementia care. And I found, just as I did when I was myself a family caregiver for my father, I found that the family members are grieving, and that they are impacted by the grief. I also observed that the grief gets overlooked because the grief gets buried underneath the demands of providing care. So, to fill a gap, I proceeded to write an article, and that's when the model came out of the 3A grief intervention model. It was published in the Omega Journal of Death and Dying, and that's when I introduced acknowledge, assess, assist. And to put it most simply, acknowledge the losses, assess the impact, and also assist with strategies that include strategies that are used in helping people who have gone through a death, the grief counseling, that kind of thing. So I did get this published in 2007, and it has since been it has since been developed further, because originally it was created for people with dementia, and it was also created for healthcare workers to intervene in helping family caregivers. And then the approach got broadened to be able to be applied to people not just to have Alzheimer's, but also people that, such as with your group at the Parkinson Society, for people with Parkinson's, people with MS, people with schizophrenia, people with depression, any illness where the caregivers do experience a loss due to having a family member who is chronically ill. So it also got broadened in that, why should this model only be introduced and provided to healthcare workers? There was no reason for this model not to go directly to family caregivers. So, I started doing 8-week groups, in introducing it to family caregivers. And then I wrote a couple of books. I wrote Caregiving with Strength for both family caregivers and professionals. But then the feedback I got was, we need a book just for the family caregiver. And so that's where Keeping It Together came, and it's got practice exercises for the families to be able to apply the content that is given, and apply, acknowledge, assess, assist. So the 3A tool for coping: acknowledge, assess, assist. They're action words to help you self-monitor with self-awareness, as I had mentioned before. They help in empowering. They give that can be used in an empowering way as you go through everyday living. So you can be able to help yourself. Who is with you 24/7? Who knows best what is going on in your life? So this tool helps you to take charge in staying in tune with yourself, on top of what is happening during adversity and loss. So again, acknowledge the adversity, assess the impact, and assist with strategies. You are assisting just by acknowledging what is going on and assessing the effects. There are three assumptions to this tool. The first assumption is where there is a struggle, challenge, adversity, there is situational loss. And here is the Mosby's Medical Dictionary definition. So I did not make this up. This is an actual definition. Situational loss is the loss of a person, thing, or quality resulting from alteration of a life situation, including changes related to illness, body image, environment, and death. So you can see how this can really be applied to family caregivers in that the life situation change is related to illness, can also be related to a change in environment if you moved in with your family member to take care of your family member. So there's a change there. Or if your family member has moved out of the home and into residence, that's a change in the environment. So in addition to experiencing a loss of the person, meaning that, let's say, even from time of diagnosis, things have changed. There is some kind of loss in health, just in health, and this could lead to other things that are lost, such as, for instance, finances. The person with the illness may at some point, or you in your situation has that happen, where the family member has had to stop working, so you don't have the same income coming in. So there's a loss of lifestyle. And even as a family caregiver, you may have you had to decrease your hours of work, and that's a loss. And then could be a loss of quality. You could lose time to yourself due to time required as a family caregiver. Loss of control of the situation. So there can be a number of losses, and there, the initial loss is the loss of the person with the illness as 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 he or she was, and then there's the subsequent losses as well. The losses can be ambiguous or are ambiguous if not acknowledged and assessed. So you are assisting to see what is going on and be on top of it, that you are experiencing some kind of loss. And so you use the acknowledge and the assess to acknowledge what's been lost and assess what's been lost. And then you don't have that ambiguity. It's clear. Assumption 2 of the 3 assumptions of the tool is that grief is a reaction to situational loss. The grief can manifest and impact on behavior and well-being in different ways, and the experience is unique to the individual. And again, just like the losses are ambiguous, the grief is disenfranchised if it is not acknowledged and assessed. Disenfranchised grief is the reaction to loss that is not socially sanctioned, openly acknowledged, or publicly mourned. In death, it's not unusual to get condolences. When there's an illness in the family, have you heard, "I'm sorry for your loss"? It's disenfranchised. So, situational loss and disenfranchised grief. How are caregivers affected? Well, without acknowledging and assessing and helping yourself, assisting, it can be quite immobilizing. And if you feel immobilized by this, it helps even to acknowledge and assess that, because then you can get out of being like, so you won't be immobilized. It can confuse judgment and decision making. The ambiguity freezes processing of the loss. And it blocks coping, which is what we're talking about here. Coping, healthy coping. And there's a risk to well-being. Can you relate to any of this? If you want, just put a yes in, because I'm speaking here, but I'm not really hearing how it's being received. So if any part of what is being said here you can relate to, please, put in the chat box, "Yes, I can relate," or "Yes," or even mention something specific that you can relate to. Thank you. This is an image of that was of a sculpture that was done by Julie Fritsch. She had lost a child, and she is a sculptor, and this happened many, many years ago, where her child passed away, and she stopped sculpting. And then years, actually, I don't know if it was years later, but a while later, she started sculpting again. And this was the first sculpture that she did. And you can really see the expression of guilt, and also see the effects of how it can zap energy. So it's good to recognize, acknowledge, assess, and process. So your resiliency gets strengthened, and you can better provide care. Oops, I think I went a little bit too far. Okay, sorry about that. What influences your daily coping? Um, We already spoke about assist by acknowledging and assessing the context. What are the losses? What what are you experiencing now? Were there any of the losses that I mentioned could you relate to that you're experiencing? Or have you thought of something else that you feel is a loss that you are experiencing? And how are you reacting? What emotions are you feeling? History. How have you coped in the past? That's going to be telling of how you cope as a caregiver. Also, in coping, um, how did you learn about how to cope? From your parents, in your family? And what is your coping style? In the book, there is a number of coping styles that are covered, that are explored. Is your head in the sand? That's denial. Denial is used by many people, and we live in a culture that, you know, kind of would encourage denial. Um, but it works for a limited time when you're dealing with illness to deny what is happening. To face the reality, you can be a better caregiver because you know what the needs are. Like you utilize the resources. If you remember about the juggling and the caregiving, how are you going to utilize resources if you're in the middle of denial? Are you proactive? Do you plan ahead? Or are you reactive? Does it take a crisis for you to react? These are coping styles, behaviors, and often there's a pattern in how you cope. Oh, I was hoping that I'd be able to get video here, but I don't think so. So I am just going to bypass this slide. Okay. Oh, okay. So I asked earlier about reaction, and there are prominent emotions that many caregivers experience: worry, fear, guilt. These are almost like normal. So you can normalize that under the circumstances, these there are certain emotions that are normal, and even being overwhelmed with this emotional whirlwind. This emotional whirlwind is in the book, and it's got a number of different emotions, or you may be experiencing a combination of the emotions. So, uh, are you feeling guilty? Are you feeling confused? Denial was mentioned. Are you feeling numb? That's almost like that immobilized kind of feeling. Do you feel isolated, hopeless? Do you feel betrayed, resentful? Do you feel shock? Often that is the initial phase in grief is to feel shock when you get a diagnosis, and it can also be in line with denial where you just are not getting it. So the key is that it's a process, and you may feel different emotions on different days. Some days may be better. Some days the emotions may be stronger. If you're feeling angry one day and then one day you may be feeling rage. Um, and the key is to try and help yourself through what you are feeling and work it through. So the third assumption of the three assumptions of the tool is that there are potential benefits to processing loss and grief, such as strengthened resiliency and well-being. You can get relief, peace, comfort, truth, and the ability to get it and keep it together. So to review, and there's a couple of new points in here, in coping strategies I'm bringing back the juggling. It's a juggling act you're doing really in, you know, self-care, caring, and but also including and allowing yourself to grieve because, and I'm going down the list here to tears. The only cure for grief is to grieve. And that's not my quote. It's Rabbi Earl Groman's quote. But it means that you have to face what is happening, process it through, make some resolution with yourself over what happens. And by acknowledging, assessing, and assisting, and using those action words, it can help you through. And again, going to the top, respite, the C acronym. Do you remember what they are? Sleep, rest, exercise, eating right, and including enjoyable moments every day in your life. Utilize resources, your supports. Know who is your supports. And getting the education you need. Humor. Just as tears are a part of this, humor helps. Laughter. Seeing the funny side, if you can. There may be moments when you can't, but when you can, it's very much encouraged. Shifting gears. This is a line that I use that is not my line. I got it from a client of mine. And it's very appropriate to be able to make change, to be able to see that things cannot be the way they were, that because of the illness, because of the change situation. Are you shifting gears? Adapting to a new normal. That's like you're shifting gears, and the new normal is coming out of that. Are you adapting to a new normal? And normalizing how you're feeling is not unusual under the circumstances. Most people would be feeling the way you're feeling. Connect, share, and reach out. This is another sculpture by Julia Fritsch, and how much relief comes from having somebody caring and somebody sharing. So connecting. If you're feeling one of the emotions is isolation, then something that you can do to assist yourself is acknowledge that and see how you may be able to get out of that isolating state. And that's where acknowledge, assess, and assist comes in as helpful for coping, because you are empowered by self-monitoring yourself, being on top of yourself with self-awareness. Now that concludes my presentation. I hope that it's been helpful. If you want to learn more, please, I invite you to visit my website. I do offer individual and group coaching. And you can also preview and order the book, Keeping It Together, on the website.